Hey, this is Wayne Williams speaking of horses. We're at the National Equestrian Trails Conference. We're here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's a beautiful setup and a great conference. We've got a lot of great highlights to show you, so stay with us here on Speaking of Horses. We're going to talk trails, trail maintenance, and everything to do with equestrian trails and the preservation of those trails right here in the U.S.
Fine, it's scramble now for chairs. My name is Sue Gray. I'm the Executive Director of the North Carolina Horse Council. We are the host organization. I will be, and Cheryl Bennett will be at the table. She's our administrative assistant. Please, if you have a question, I tell everybody I kind of look like I know, but she has all the answers. So everybody, if you do have a question on the conference or anything to do, please get up with Cheryl and she will be happy to do that. As a host, I want to welcome you to North Carolina. As a host, someone said to me earlier, this was kind of like herding cats, wasn't it? I said, I love cats. But it brought up to mind a story or an issue, really a parable that my dad told me one time, and I've never forgotten it. And he said to me, Sue, I'm going to tell you this story, and you need to remember this as you go through your career. The story was about a grandfather and his grandson. My father didn't have any grandsons, he had all granddaughters. But anyway, it's about a grandson. And he said to me, he had a mule, had an ass. And they were going to take this ass down to the county fair in the little town that was just right across the bridge. So the little boy got on the mule, and they started down the road, and a car came by, rolled down the window, and said, shame on you. And the old man looked around and said, what do you mean? Well, shame on that little boy for making you walk. Oh, went on down the road. So Grandpa said, okay, son, you get off, I'll get on. Went on down the road. Car came by, rolled down the window, said, shame on you. What for? For making that little boy walk. Grandfather shook his head a minute, stopped a minute, and he said, okay, I got this figured out. We'll both ride that mule. So Grandpa got on, little boy got on, and down the road they went. Pretty soon another car came down the road, rolled down the window, said, shame on you. Now he's really perplexed. Making that mule carry both of you. So little boy, they rolled on down the road, little boy, old man got off the mule, and said, son, we're going to carry this mule to town. And they picked up the mule, and they started down the road. And they came to the old country bridge. Now the old country bridge, I don't know if any of y'all are from the South, but we have a lot of those. And you look at them, you think, okay, we'll try. They pick the mule up, and they start across the bridge. And the little boy says, Grandpa, I can't hold him. I can't hold him. No, son, you got to hold on. Grandpa, I can't hold him. And off the mule goes down the side of the bridge and drowns. I looked at my father and I said, that's the strangest story I've ever heard. And he said, daughter, you got to remember this. If you try to please everybody, you can kiss your ass goodbye. So we're not going to be here to try to please everybody. We hope we do. And we do believe that on the agenda we have something for everybody. So with that, I want you to know, please don't worry about taking a lot of notes. Please don't worry about, oh, did I get that? In your bags, you should have a list of all the presenters and how to contact them, a list of the participants who allowed us to use their names, and we will be providing for you prior to the end of the conference a jump drive that has every PowerPoint presentation on it. So you will take that home. You will have that information, and we hope that will please everybody. So I'm on it. If my dad were alive, he would say, right on to that. With that, I'd like to introduce for you Yvette Rollins, the president of the National Equestrian Trails Conference, and she'd like to give you a general welcome. So have a good conference, and I'll be talking to you later.
Thank you, Sue. First of all, I would love for everyone to give Sue a big round of applause for all the work all of her helpers. They've done a fantastic job pulling this together. We've had an awesome planning committee that we have worked behind the scenes, monthly phone calls, sometimes weekly phone calls, many emails.
Hey, speaking of horses, and we're here at the National Equestrian Trails Conference, and happy to be here. We are actually in Durham, North Carolina, Raleigh, Durham. We're kind of between the two here, but I'm sitting between two wonderful trail advocates from around the country, but Bud and Gwen Wills. They live in just outside Clarion, or right around Clarion, Pennsylvania, which is north of Pittsburgh a bit. Some great trail riding. The Allegheny Forest is there, and Cook Forest, and some great riding. But we're happy to have you here. Of course, I see you guys probably once a year anyway in Harrisburg at the Horse World Expo. But I'm going to start with Gwen. Tell us a little bit about, now you're going to be doing a talk tomorrow too, a little bit about, you have some clinics or some 3-day training things about taking care of trails, proper trail use. Give us an insight, Gwen.
Well, what we do with the 3-day trainings and the 1-day trainings, this is all through the Pennsylvania Equine Council. And what we've learned is over the years that horse people do not get involved with maintaining trails as bikers and hikers do. So when it comes time for other user groups to want to work on trails or have the trails to themselves and don't want horses on them, we lose. So we started a training to get volunteers feeling comfortable with working with the agencies. We started a 3-day workshop for residents of Pennsylvania. It's free. We get a grant to help with those costs. And they come, as well as some of the state forests and state parks people come also to learn about equestrian trails. What do horses need rather than the other non-motorized user groups? What's special about horses that they can be sure that we're doing everything we can for safe traffic of the horses?
Now you're also talking about multi-use trails, right?
Yes, shared use.
Okay, so Bud, how would you first approach somebody if you want to talk to them about how to be courteous on a multi-use trail?
Well, I think the biggest thing is it's all about education. So we're trying to educate the other users. Mainly we run into hikers and bikers, and so we're trying to educate them that horses are a prey animal. And so they can think for themselves, and so we kind of tell them to, if you approach a horse, you're going down a trail and you're a hiker, stay on the lower side of the trail. Don't go up on the hill for the simple reason that a prey animal is attacked from the upside of the hill. So stay on the lower side of the trail and talk to us. Talk to us, whether you're on a bike or on a horse. The horse or mule sees you as maybe something he's not sure of, especially if you got a big backpack on. But if you talk to us, he sees you as a person. Now he knows a voice, so he knows that you're a person. So it's kind of an educational thing, and we as horse people have to remember too that they're on the trail, the same trail that we have. So we have to kind of, it always says that everybody yields to the horse, but when you start to demand the right of way, that some things happen. So just kind of make common sense and do the best.
Well, the common sense is a part, because I know at some of the trails in Wisconsin where I live, there are some separate bike trails that cross the horse trails. So you'll have a bicycle, you won't even know it's there till it just shoots out in the trail in front of you. If you're right there on your horse, that's a situation you don't like, but nobody's really at fault.
Right. And this is what I say, we all have to pay attention when we're in the woods. And if I'm in an area, most of the areas that we ride, like you said, Wayne, up in the Alleghenies and that, we don't see a lot of bikes. But if I'm in an area that has a lot of bikes, you have to be aware of that. And so you have to can't say, well, they have to look out for us. We all have to look out for each other. So pay attention to what's down the road. That's part of our trail design is having sweeping turns and long sight lines so that everybody can see everybody else, so that there's no of those big surprises when a biker approaches a horse. He's worried about going down. He's watching right in front of him. So he's not looking down the trail. So we have to kind of be aware of that. And bikes are silent. They, a lot of times our horses or mules will hear them coming before we do. And so kind of pay attention to what your animal's doing.
Right. Very true. Now, you've also got a program. Actually, I was reading your pamphlet last night, Ride Smart. Tell us a little about that, Gwen.
Well, the Ride Smartly, it's a Leave No Trace program, and where the Ride Smart came from, it wasn't from Craig Cameron, other than we have talked to him about that, and he says, I don't care if you use Ride Smart. And I said, well, we kind of developed at the same time, Craig, but we were riding in the Allegheny National Forest, and at that time, it's 17,000 acres, and at that time we were riding with one of their main people with trying to keep recreation and the forest system going, and he said, if horse people don't learn to ride smart, they're not going to be riding here. We have to be paying attention to where we're allowed to go, whose land we're on, how that agency manages that land, and we have to partner with them to understand what to do. Some of the easy things we can do to ride smart is carry cross ties. That if you stop along the trail for lunch or just a break, cross tie your horse between trees. Don't tie him right to a tree so he chews the tree. If he's a horse that gets nervous and wants to paw the ground and dig holes, have him hobble broken. If you can't do it, get a professional to help you hobble break that animal. That's not a cruel thing, that's a safety thing, because if that animal does ever get tangled up, he won't struggle and hurt himself trying to get out. There's just a lot of common sense things that we can do that doesn't put us out, doesn't cause us any problems, but we're looked at from other user groups and the agency people as caring, and we do care, or we wouldn't pay to keep a 1,000-pound animal all the time that you can't use all the time.
Well, there's something else about that, and if a horse, is barking a tree, so to speak, some of that you just can't repair immediately. But if you got one that's pawing a little bit on a picket line or tied or whatever, it's very easy to just kind of fill that in and smooth that out before you leave. So again, there's hardly a trace you were there.
That's exactly it. Trying to, you're always going to leave horse hoof prints and some manure, and we don't advocate getting off and kicking the manure out of the way. What we, it's just, it's nutrients, and with the timbering and everything, a little bit of nutrient in the ground isn't going to hurt anything. But the idea of leaving no trace is trying to be minimum impact. You're going to make impact.
Well, when you talked about a horse plop, several years ago, a couple of the state legislators in Wisconsin came to one of the trails. There was horse plop on the trail that was fresh, and they wanted to know how that was removed. And with horse plop, rather than dog, unlike dog or other animals, they're basically eating grains and grasses. The minute it hits the ground, it's not very long before the birds are picking out of there what they want. It gets scattered around. Then there's a little rain, and it's all gone. And it's good natural fertilizer right back in the ground.
Well, and the other thing when your horse, don't let him stop to go. Keep him moving. And if you scatter that manure down the trail, everybody says, well, it spreads it out. Yes, it does, but it breaks down quicker. A big pile doesn't break down as quick. So those are one of the Ride Smart things, is keep your horse moving and let him go ahead and spread that down the trail. So
drop it in the line.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we teach in the Ride Smart program.
Because, it was amazing. I thought these guys actually believe that this stuff turns to stone and stays right here. So tell us a little bit about how people get involved in your 3-day class.
Well, we advertise, of course. The best thing to do is go online, PennsylvaniaEquineCouncil.com, go to the Trails side of it, the Trails program, and at that time, you can sign up for it. Again, for Pennsylvania residents, it's free. We pay for your room and we pay for your meals. We only take between 15 and 20 people at a time. The classes are held in July. Matter of fact, it'll be starting the 18th of July. It starts the class this year. And if you're from out of state, you can still come to the class, but because we're feeding you, because we're using a grant, we need to charge a minimum fee for you to come to cover that. But that's the way you get involved. The other thing is we do 1-days. And the idea behind this is that if you come to a 3-day, you kind of become the foreman for a work crew. Now, if we come and those folks go home and they develop some friends and they get some people gathered up, then Gwen and I come and we do a 1-day. And the idea of that is that me as a 3-day person go to you, Wayne, as a forest supervisor and say, how can I help you? How can I help you keep these trails open? Well, they don't have crews to go out, and they don't have to put time into going out with us. So if I have a crew that's a foreman, which to me a 3-day trained person, and a viable crew that knows what's going on, now they don't have to go out. And most of them don't work on the weekends, and that's when most of us can do the work. So it becomes a process where we have good crews working with the agencies. The agencies are short on manpower, they're short on money, and so if we can help them, that helps us keep the trails open.
Well, I'm going to pull the typical husband and wife thing now. Bud gave a website. Now, you want to give the correct website?
Certainly. It's PennsylvaniaEquineCouncil.org, but they changed it. It's been changed.
I heard that, and I thought, I'm waiting for my chance to get this snuck in here. I changed it. All right, well, you're going to be talking here at the National Equestrian Trails Conference in Raleigh, Durham, and it's been a pleasure talking with you. I know I see you in the Trails booth and the Pennsylvania Equine Council booth every year in Harrisburg. Do you guys come to Baltimore?
We come to Baltimore.
Baltimore, the Horse World Expo. Timonium?
No.
Okay. I know I see you in Harrisburg every year, wave at you, talk to you when I'm walking by announcing, but it's been a pleasure. Gwen, thank you.
Thank you. We always enjoy your announcing at Horse World Expo when we hear you every year.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Appreciate what the expo does for us.
And Bud, thank you.
Well, thank you. And again, I enjoy you at Theater Equus at the expo.
On the evening show? Yeah. Well, thank you.
And again, come to the expo in February. It's great.
Horse World Expo, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Come talk to them. You talk to these guys, see the expo, stay and watch our evening show. It's great.
That's right. It is great. We have a good time.
Thank you very much for joining us. We're right here, National Equestrian Trails Conference in beautiful Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina. Thank you for speaking of horses. Well, of course, one of the more entertaining speakers we always hear is Mr. Robert Eversole, who's known as the Trail Meister. He's got a great website, tells you all about great places to ride. He's out of Oregon, rides the mountains, backpacks, and he's very entertaining. Here's just a few highlights of Robert Eversole, the Trail Meister.
I want it to be above my horse's head so that the horse can walk around and feet it underneath it.
So if you just take the guy's land, they 3 feet sign up.
Yeah, if I take the surface only, I can do about 6 inches.
But if you have a percheron, 19, you may
Yeah. So I want it high enough that my horse can walk unimpeded underneath. I want it to be I want to park my horse far enough that he can't rub or chew on the tree when he's tied up on it. But more important than that, what about where we set up our high line? Is that important? Yes. Who likes fabulous views along the lake? Yeah. Would our horses enjoy the view? No. Probably, maybe. They're not go there, right? What happens if we have horse poop and everything else right in this glorious lake spot? And they're going to poop in the water, and we might be restricted. Something? Whetstone. Does Whetstone have a pretty place like that? Like a herring?
Very much like Christopher said, I'm with the Forest Service, and we're recognizing that through a lot of these youth organizations, the Public Land Corps, the 21st Century Service organizations, we're able to bring in, not only youth but diversity and start that sort of ladder of potential employees for the future that actually are connecting with the youth of America and making us more relevant to their lives.
And who understand trails. Yes. Because that's what's important.
Well, Backcountry Horsemen of America has, in addition to several youth initiatives that we're trying to get off the ground and collectively, they're in our strategic plan. In fact, it's our first goal for our current strategic plan. But there's another side component that's really interesting, worth noting. It's really about carrying on the heritage, in this case.
We're at the National Equestrian Trails Conference in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our Friday evening, July 8th keynote speaker, Randy Rasmussen, Backcountry Horsemen of America.
Well, I'll do a quick introduction, and Tom mentioned about Backcountry Horsemen of America. I'm really proud to serve for Backcountry Horsemen as their Director for Public Lands and Recreation. I mean, this is an organization that gives and gives and gives. They're a service organization, first and foremost. And so, you know, whether we get to ride the trails that we work on and maintain is probably secondary. You know, it's work parties and the kind of work that Tom and Deirdre and Yvette and all these other folks do here to keep trails open for everybody. That is what impresses me and gives me credentials to be able to strengthen these relationships with the agencies in Washington, D.C. So, let me ask you all here, how many people trail ride? Good, good. How many people maintain trails? Well, that's a good showing too. How many people are public land advocates? Oh, come on, come on. There's more than that. Everybody here is a public land advocate, and if you probably won't be in this room if you weren't. So we're going to talk a bit of advocacy here, and if you're not an advocate already, I'm hopeful that when you leave the room, you will be an advocate for public lands and want to express that. That's my job, and if I'm not doing my job well, then you'll just walk away indifferent this evening to the threats that we see. We talked about in the panel here some of the threats to horseman access, use of public lands, be it growing metropolitan areas or too many people on trails or conflicts. Those kinds of things, however, pale in comparison to the topic we're addressing this evening, what we're calling the federal land seizure, the federal land grab. And that's what I want to detail for you all in some slides. It's going to be PowerPoint heavy, but there's a reason for that. These are going to be made available to you on that flash drive that Sue was talking about. And I have done a fair amount of research and included citations in my work, so I want you all to be able to use this. But don't take my word for it. Look at those citations, do your own research to see what the source of it is and where the problems might be and how you can ultimately protect public lands. But so that's the intent of the slides that are going to be in there. Those links should be active even in the PDF files that you're given on that flash drive. In addition to the panelists that we had, perfect, all right, thanks so much. In addition to the panelists we have this afternoon, how many people are from Western states? Okay, how many Midwest? Southeast? Okay, New England or Great Lakes? All right, but how many people, regardless of what state you would, go out and play or and work on your public lands? I assume everybody. Okay. All right, let's get into it. This is the topic here. Tom mentioned us. That's our website. We keep trails open for everyone. Quickly about BCHA's mission, and it includes perpetuate the common sense use and enjoyment of horses in America's backcountry and wilderness, and to work to ensure that public lands remain open to recreational stock use. Those are two of our 5 parts of our mission. The third one, too, is to work with the agencies as partners, and that's abundantly clear in what we do. Tom mentioned 33 states. Here's a map showing where we are today in terms of BCHA from coast to coast, with a heavy concentration in the Midwest, Southeast, and the Western states. All of the Western states with the exception of Hawaii. And so, over 180 chapters locally as we're growing here. So here's in a nutshell what this demonstration, or we're going to demonstrate tonight. The kind of the who, what, where, and more about the public land seizure, the public land grab. And so, we'll try to answer some of these questions. If we don't, we can get to a discussion about it when I'm done. But I'm trying to give you an overview here. This is the second slide about just what this presentation will cover. And lastly, how we can take action to ensure that public lands remain in public hands. That's the key message that we want to have tonight. So with that, I'm sure you're all well aware. You as citizens, or even as visitors to this country, are partial owners of this. I mean, it was Jose Arroyo in the video this afternoon that was thrilled and excited to learn after some time that he is as welcome here as anybody is, and that's an important thing to remember. I grew up with Johnny Horizon, and my uncle being a BLM state director, I kind of had it in my blood, but not everyone knows about our ownership, have partial ownership of all these great public lands. So, a little history overview here, and I want to be clear, I'm not a historian, I'm not an attorney. This is filtered through my eyes, but it's kind of hard to argue with the U.S. Constitution, and specifically what's called the property clause. Now, the Archives Department didn't like it when I redlined or marked up with a Sharpie this particular section here, so I'll give it to you in a printed version here that you can read. It's just that the Congress has the full power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations regarding the property of the United States, and this is primarily talking about the federal estate, the public lands. And so this is an important point to start with, that the concept of public lands and who is to have control over them is enshrined in our Constitution, and that's not being recognized to the degree it should be in this debate. But as part of that background, you have to also understand, because there really is an East versus West divide in terms of how the states originated, the original 13 colonies and lands granted or ceded from Britain, going across this map showing the different land purchases throughout our country's young history, be it the Louisiana purchase or cession from Mexico, and even the Oregon Territory up there in the Northwest has its own unique story, and how the federal government ultimately purchased or had these lands acquired, and they've always been in federal hands. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward too. So there is a big difference in the origins of a lot of our states, and certainly in those western states where you can see kind of a mosaic of different ways that the lands were acquired by the federal government. In a nutshell, this is a graphic from the Center for Western Priorities, and what they're telling us is that states don't have a legal right to seize public lands. But that's enshrined in case law, not just the U.S. Supreme Court, but 2 or 3 decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court. A state like Utah, which is attempted now to, by legislative fiat from the Utah legislature and its governor, try to exert control over the federal lands within its border.
From the National Equestrian Trails Conference in Raleigh, North Carolina, we want to give a great big thank you to the North Carolina Horse Council, who was the host for this event. And please stay with Speaking of Horses, because next year's conference is going to be at a different location around the country. We'll keep you posted. Thanks for joining us here on Speaking of Horses.